Clarence.
Question number 7, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 7 and 16 together. On the 24th of May, the United Kingdom co-hosted an international pledging conference for the Horn of Africa that helped mobilise nearly £2 billion to help nearly 32 million people across the region.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The East Africa Rains and the pledging conference have both come, but the food crisis is worsening. Just 3 weeks ago, the government announced a further aid cut to the region. It is local organisations which need more funding the most. Will the Minister set targets to increase funding to local organisations for adapting to climate change in the region and to diversify livelihoods to support vulnerable communities?
Well, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady is right about the importance of localism and localisation. I should make clear to her that Britain's pledge was £143 million. That will have an enormous effect. She should also bear in mind that we have a degree of flex when it comes to humanitarian budgets, and we have announced for next year that the British taxpayer, Britain, will be spending £1,000 million on humanitarian relief.
Dr Philippa Wetford.
Very much, Mr Speaker. When the UK co-chaired the UN pledging conference, the International Development Minister described the situation as one of the most devastating humanitarian crises in the world. Yet he's cut funding compared with previous years and pledged less than 20% of the contribution that was given by the UK to the 2017 droughts, with over 70 million people now classed as at threat of starvation. Isn't he rather ashamed of the UK's meagre response?
Yeah. Well, I think, if I may say so, Mr Speaker, that her response to what I said is not fully comprehensive. We have allocated something like £400 million to the East and Central Africa, and although it is true that the bilateral spend is slightly below last year, as I said, we do have some flexibility. It is the starting point for our spending this year, and of course we will keep all these matters very much in our minds.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Climate change and conflict is causing untold misery across the Horn of Africa, and it's also forcing millions of people to leave their homes. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that we should be spending more of our overseas aid in stabilising lives in places like East Africa and less on expensive asylum hotels here in the UK?
Well, my right honourable friend is right, and she may rest assured that these points are made in discussions within government. The point I would make is that as a result of that, the Treasury agreed to provide an extra £2,500 million of support to compensate for that spending, and I think that was the right decision, and I strongly support it.
Maggie Throop.
Speaker, in February I visited Kenya with World Vision UK and saw firsthand the impact of climate change on drought and hunger. Whilst, as my right friend already said, the £143 million aid package announced at the UN pledging conference in May is welcome, what more can the UK government do to support this crisis-stricken part of the world at this really important time?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right in what she says, and that is why we have announced that we intend to publish a white paper setting a roadmap towards achieving the SDGs by 2030 and making greater progress on tackling those very climate change problems. And we hope to engage the interest, involvement and support of colleagues on both sides of the House in that white paper endeavour.
Minister, please.
Thank you. Mr Speaker, over 29 million people across Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia and South Sudan are now experiencing catastrophic hunger levels following a fifth failed rainy season in a row. It is also the fourth year in a row that this government has cut aid to these countries. Oxfam has estimated that one person is likely to die of hunger every 28 seconds between now and July. Can the Minister please explain how he is restoring Britain's leadership in international development while decimating our support to some of the very poorest people on earth?
Well, first of all, let me say that British leadership has been exercised at these two very big conferences which took place in Saudi and Qatar, and British expertise and technical know-how is ensuring that there is greater resilience and adaptation spend to drive up the ability to survive these crises when they take place next. But if I may say so, she must not diminish the extraordinary support and leadership that Britain is giving across the Horn of Africa. As I said, the figures that we have announced are preliminary figures. We will react to the crisis. That's one of the things we are able to do. And of course, those figures take no account of the tremendous support that British taxpayers are giving through the multilateral system.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 9.
Mr. Speaker, the Government recognises the challenging debt situation facing many African countries. The UK is working with international partners to address rising debt vulnerabilities.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every dollar spent by low-income countries on servicing unsustainable debt is a dollar not spent on providing basic services and tackling climate change. I know the Minister wants to make a difference on this, but the status quo clearly isn't working. And so given that 90% of developing country debt contracts are governed by English law, why will the Government not agree to even consult on legislative options to compel private creditors to take part in debt restructurings and make them part of the solution, not the problem?
Well, as he knows, we are looking at that specific issue. We do think there is a case for majority voting when we come to debt settlements, and we are exploring all of that. And he's right to emphasise this. 15% of low-income countries are already in distress, and 45% are at high risk of entering debt distress as well. But I can tell him that next week at the Macron summit in Paris, Britain will be driving forward the climate-resilient debt clauses, which our UK Export Credit Guarantees Group, UKEF, was the first country to start to put into grants. That will make an enormous difference, and we are pressing for all creditors to offer such clauses in their loans.
Osborne.
Number 10, please.